Hello everybody. In this lecture we will talk about network architectures and specifically about the architecture of internet and how the web works. What I have done is that I have divided this lecture into three parts. The part 1 will talk about what is computer network. I will give an introduction of what computer networks are, what are the applications of computer networks. In part 2 I will give you an overview of different types of network architectures, in which we will talk about how a campus network is architected, how residential networks work, and how corporate enterprise networks work. And in part 3 we will talk about architecture of internet and how the web works. So, starting with the first part, the computer network introduction. The classical definition of a computer network is that if you can interconnect two or more autonomous computers such that they can communicate and share resources, it is called as a computer network. This is the definition of a computer network. The geographical spread of a computer network could be anything. It could be computers connected in one room, it could be one building, it could be one campus, it could be a city, it could be across multiple cities or the whole globe. Size could be anything, but if multiple computers are interconnected such that they can communicate with each other and they can share resources, it is called as a computer network. Now, depending on the geographical spread of the network, computer networks are classified into three categories: LAN, MAN and WAN. If the geographical spread is small, let us say one building or one small campus, then it is called as LAN or local area network, because the spread is local. If the spread is a city, then it is called as MAN or metropolitan area network. And if the spread is much larger, interconnecting multiple cities across the whole globe, it is called as WAN or wide area network. Now, the reason we categorize it into three categories is that depending on the geographical spread, the technology that is used to set up this network is different. So, the technology that we use in LAN is different, in MAN is different, and in WAN is different. And as we go along, I will give you a brief introduction of different type of technologies which are used to implement LAN, MAN and WANs. Now, coming to applications of computer networks, as I said that the core application of computer networks is that it provides communication and resource sharing. So, in terms of resource sharing, we could share hardware or software. I will give you some examples. If I have a printer connected to a computer, then any other computer connected over network to this computer can access that printer. So, I could share my printer across multiple computers which are connected over a network. Or I could also have a network printer which can directly connect on the network, and through the network any computer on the network can access that printer. So, this is an example of hardware resource sharing. Another example of hardware resource sharing could be sharing a disk. I could have some files, maybe some movies on a disk of a computer, and it can be accessed across other computers over the network. So, I could share that drive over the network, and through the shared drive I can access that movie or files from other computers. Similarly, I could access a software, I could share a software resource. So, I could have a software running on a computer or a server, and all computers connected to this server over the network can use that software. So, this is an example of resource sharing. Similarly, information sharing is another very important application of computer networks, and every day we use World Wide Web or the internet browsing that we do is the biggest example of application of computer networks. In this, the information is stored in a server called the World Wide Web server or WWW server, and any client machine across the internet can access that server and hence access the information stored in that server, and this information is searchable. So, as we go along we will talk about how the World Wide Web works, and this is a searchable information on the internet which people can access. Similarly, lot of examples of communication over networks. So, every day we use email, we use chatting, we use voice over IP, phone calls which work on the internet. These are examples of communication over the networks or internet. Another important scientific application is remote computing. So, if I have a high end server computer anywhere on the network, remotely I can log into this compute server and run my application programs. These are typically scientific application programs related to computation, and I can remotely access servers and run my programs. I do not have to physically go to the server and run those programs. Another very important scientific application of networks is grid computing or distributed processing or computing. In this, what we do is that we combine large number of servers into one grid or a distributed computing system, and compute applications run individually on all these individual computers, and the results from individual computers can be combined to create a final application result. Most of the modern supercomputers which we have today are constructed using this concept of distributed processing, in which large number of small servers are interconnected over a small computer network, and combined together they form a very high computational capacity machine which is called as a supercomputer. So, these are various applications of computer networks in general. If we talk about different components that go on to constitute a computer network, then there are 5 key components: the physical media which interconnects the computer, the interconnecting devices which provide this connectivity, the computers or AND devices themselves, the networking software which provides communication between these computers, and finally, the applications that run on these networks. Let me very briefly go through each of them. The first component which is used to construct a computer network are the physical media which provide the connectivity. There are 3 types of key physical medias. The first is copper cables, which are used for short distance communication, and you might have heard of UTP cables which are used for providing computer network connectivity. There are also fiber optic cables which are used for long distance communication. On fiber optic cable, you can send signals up to 100 kilometers without using a repeater. So, long distance communication we use fiber optic cables, and the third important media is the wireless media, where air is used as the medium, and across this wireless media you can provide connectivity. So, you have cable medias and wireless medias which are used for providing interconnection between computing devices. The second component are the networking devices themselves, which are used for providing this interconnectivity. So, you might have heard about switches, routers, modems, wireless dongles. All these devices are the interconnecting devices which connect the computers with each other and provide the interconnection. The third component are the computers or end devices themselves. They could be desktop computers, they could be servers, it could be laptops, and today very popularly your smartphones, which have also become an end devices which connect over the network and provide you networking applications. These computers are typically, or the end devices are divided into 2 categories: servers and clients. So, servers are the machines which provide the resource or the information, and clients are the machines which access the resource or the information. So, servers are high end systems which have hardware or software resources or applications running on them, which they serve to other client computers, and clients are the machines which access the server to access any hardware or software resource or use them for intercommunication. The fourth component is the networking protocol or the networking software which provides the communication between servers and clients and end devices. The protocol that is popularly used in computer networks is called as a TCP/IP protocol, and this protocol provides intercommunication between computers. So, the information that flows from one computer to other computer flows in the form of what is called as packets. So, every packet has got certain information content which it takes from the source machine to the destination machine and brings back the information from the destination machine back to the source machine, and this communication protocol definition is given by the TCP/IP protocol, which is used on the networks or internet in general. And finally, the fifth component are the application which reside on these computer networks. So, for all practical purpose, as an end user, the networking architecture is transparent to the end user. I do not care what protocol you are using or what networking interconnecting devices are being used or what is the physical media being used. As a user, the only thing I am concerned about or I care about are the application that I am using. And I have already talked about various kind of applications that are there, starting from email to the internet radio or internet TV, which is the most current application that people use. So, as an end user, I use applications over the computer network which has got multiple components and an architecture underlying it. Okay. So, this completes the part 1 of my lecture. In the second part, I will talk about what is the architecture of this underlying network that we use to provide these applications. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the part 2 of our lecture on network architectures. In this part, I will talk about architecture of different types of networks. If I want to set up a small computer network in my lab or room connecting few computers, the only thing that I need is a switch and a few UTP patch cords, and I can connect my computers using these UTP patch cords and the switch. The switch will provide the interconnection between these computers, and I have a small network in my lab. If a switch is a 8-port switch, then I can connect 8 computers, and in case I want to add more computers, I can simply add one more switch and cascade these 2 switches and add more computers. This is an ad hoc architecture, but if I want to extend this network to my building or my campus or a city or multiple cities, then I cannot scale this architecture, because this is an ad hoc architecture. So, the architecture that is used in different types of networks, I will briefly talk about. In case of a campus network, where I have a few buildings in a campus, the architecture that we use is called as a 3-tier architecture. In this architecture, we have a data center where we have application servers, and in this data center, we have what is called as a backbone switch. So, all the servers connect to the backbone switch. In each building, we have a distribution switch, and this distribution switches in different buildings are connected to the backbone switch using fiber optic cables, because these distances are typically long, a few kilometers each. So, the backbone switch gets connected to the distribution switches using fiber optic cables, and within each building we place multiple access switches. The access switches on one hand connect to the end devices, that is the computers or laptops, and on the other hand connect to the distribution switch. So, we have a inverted tree topology in which the backbone switch, the distribution switch and the access switches get interconnected to each other and provide connectivity to end computers, and hence provide connectivity from one computer to other computer. In case I want to have a wireless network also, then I can connect wireless access points to different access switches and provide wireless connectivity in the region in which an access point has been provisioned. This is a very simple architecture which is used to provide connectivity in a campus environment. And finally, the network would also have a firewall or a UTM device to connect it to the internet. Similarly, if I want to provide connectivity in residences, homes, then 2 technology options are used. One is wired broadband and the other is wireless broadband. In wired broadband, what we do is that we use the telephone cables to provide the connectivity. This is also called as a DSL broadband connectivity. In this connectivity, you have a DSL modem at your residence. The voice signal from your telephone and the data signal from your computer are multiplexed and sent on the telephone wire that comes to your home. At the telephone exchange, these two signals are separated. The voice signal is sent to the voice exchange and the data signal is sent on the internet. So, using the telephone wire that comes to your home and using a DSL modem, you can use the same telephone wire connectivity to provide data or the internet connectivity also. In wireless broadband, in which we use the 2G or 3G wireless to provide data connectivity, what we have is that either we will have a 2G or 3G and these days even 4G dongles, which I can connect to my laptop or desktop, or in case of mobile phones, this is inbuilt. So, using the data connectivity on 2G or 3G or 4G wireless networks, I can access the internet using that. The advantage of this kind of connectivity is that this can provide seamless data connectivity or internet connectivity on my mobile phones even when I am traveling. If I have a corporate network, which means that I have multiple offices across multiple cities which I want to interconnect, like the network of Microsoft, all the Microsoft offices across the globe are interconnected to each other. Similarly, examples would be for IBM, for Intel or any company which may have national or international presence, they interconnect their corporate offices, business offices across the globe. Okay. And this network is used to provide data exchange between the offices, in most of the cases voice over IP also. So, they build a voice over IP network across their multiple offices and they have a data network which can be used to share software and hardware resources across offices. The architecture that is used in this kind of corporate enterprise networks are multiple. One possibility could be that I can have a point to point leased line network between multiple offices. So, I have point to point connectivity between multiple offices and I can use this point to point link to provide the data network connectivity. The second architecture or technology that is used to provide such connectivity is that I can use VPN over internet. Since each corporate office has got its own internet connectivity, I can build VPN or virtual private network over the internet to provide secure communication across these multiple offices. So, instead of having separate dedicated point to point links between multiple corporate offices, I could use the standard internet connectivity that comes to these offices to provide the data communication between them. One advantage of this architecture is that every organization would have users who are traveling, or you may want to access the corporate data when you are at home. So, what you can do is that while you are traveling or while you are at home, if you have any sort of internet connectivity using DSL connection, a cable connection or a wireless broadband connection, then you can use VPN client software on your laptop or desktop at home, and using that client VPN software you can over the internet you can have a VPN connectivity to your corporate network and access data. So, in this architecture the open internet is used to provide secure communication between the offices and also between telecommuters who want to access the corporate data. The third architecture that is used to provide corporate connectivity is also called as the MPLS VPN architecture. In this architecture, what is done is that multiple offices are connected to a service provider network. So, as we go along in part 3 of my lecture, I will tell you what is the architecture of service provider networks. So, what you do is that you would have service providers which would have national presence or international presence, and you interconnect all your corporate offices to these service provider networks. These service provider networks are used to provide internet services and voice services. So, using the service provider network, you build a what is called as an MPLS VPN network, which is a private network interconnecting multiple corporate offices. And you can also provide internet VPN connectivity to the telecommuters through the service provider networks. So, here the advantage is that you contract out the complete connectivity to one service provider which has national and international presence, and they will provide connectivity to all your office locations as well as connectivity to your mobile telecommuters, and they will provide you all types of services which would include data communication between the offices, internet access as well as voice over IP applications. So, this in brief was different type of architectures which are used to set up a campus computer network or provide network connectivity in residences or to provide connectivity to corporate enterprise networks. With this, we end the part 2 of this lecture, and in the next part we will talk about the architecture of internet and how the web works. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the part 3 of our lecture. In this part, we will talk about the architecture of internet. What is internet? It is said that internet is network of networks. It connects millions and millions of computers across the globe. The way internet is architectured is the following. Every customer has customer network. So, every organization has got its own network, and we have talked about different architectures which are used in setting up different types of networks. So, every customer network would be there, and these customer networks connect to what are called as the ISPs or internet service providers. There are two types of internet service providers, national ISPs and international ISPs. National ISPs are the internet service providers which have got national presence. So, they have a network which spans across a nation. For example, in India, we have Reliance, Airtel as national ISPs, and there are many more. In North America, for example, we have Cable and Wireless, AT&T, which are national ISPs. So, every country would have national ISPs which would have national networks, and they provide internet connectivity. So, the customer networks connect to the national ISPs. These national ISPs further connect to international ISPs. International ISPs are service providers which have networks which span multiple continents. Examples are Teleglobe, British Telecom, Singapore Telecom. These are international ISPs and have got presence in different parts of the globe. So, the customer networks connect to the national ISPs. The national ISPs interconnect to each other within a nation, and they also interconnect to international ISPs. The international ISPs interconnect to multiple international ISPs at different parts of the world, and by this interconnection of customer networks, national ISPs and multiple international ISPs, a very large global network is formed which is called as the internet. So, internet is nothing but a very large network of networks, a very large network which is created globally by interconnecting multiple small networks across the globe. If we see what is the architecture of national ISPs, or how do the national ISPs look like. This figure that you see here is the network diagram of one of a very prominent national ISPs in India, Reliance Telecom. The red lines that you see here are the fiber optic cables that they have laid across the country. In different cities, they would have POPs, or point of presence. POPs or the point of presence are the points at which they interconnect to the customer networks. So, smaller cities would have one POP and bigger cities may have multiple POPs. So, they have a fiber optic network laid across the country and they have got POPs in different cities, and at these POP locations customer networks connect to this national ISPs. This is how they provide connectivity to multiple customer networks across the whole country. Similarly, what you see in this diagram is the network diagram of a very prominent international ISP, Teleglobe. The green lines that you see in this diagram are the fiber optic cables that have been laid across continents, and most of it is submarine cable. It is laid under the sea. So, they have a very large network which spans multiple countries, multiple continents. For example, in this network it spans Southeast Asia, Europe, Middle East and North America. And again these international ISPs have got points of presence in different countries at which they connect to the national ISPs of those countries. So, what you have is that you have national ISPs and international ISPs. The national ISPs have got fiber optic network across a country and they interconnect at multiple points to other national ISPs. The point of interconnection of national ISPs is also called as internet exchange, and these national ISPs interconnect to international ISPs which span multiple countries. These international ISPs are again interconnected to each other using internet exchanges, and this is how a very large global network is formed, which is formed by interconnecting national ISPs in different countries and international ISPs which span multiple continents. Now, what is the application of this internet? Internet is nothing but a network. The price or the cost I pay for internet connectivity is not for the content, it is for the setting up and maintaining this large global network. In most of the cases, the content or the information is free. The cost for the internet connection that I pay is for the infrastructure of setting up this large global network is what I pay for. The information that is coming on the internet, which typically most of the time comes through World Wide Web. The most popular application of internet is World Wide Web, which provides me information which is searchable. I can search for that information on the internet and I can access that information on my computer. Now, let us see very briefly how the World Wide Web works. In World Wide Web, we have a server which is called as the web server. So, web server is a server which hosts the information, and on the client computers we have what is called as a browser. The browser like Mozilla or Chrome are client applications which access information from the web server, and the application protocol that is used to access this information is also called as the HTTP protocol or hypertext transfer protocol. So, on the client side I have applications which are called as browser. On the server side I have applications which are called as the web server application. A very popular web server application is Apache web server, and there are many others also. So, on the server side I have a web server running, on the client side I have a client browser running, and this client browser sends a request to the web server to get the information. The way it works is like this. On the client side I write the address of the website which I want to access. The name of the website examples could be www.google.com. So, www.google.com is the name of the Google website or Google web server. So, if I write www.google.com on my browser, it means that I am telling my browser that I want to access the content of Google web server. Now, on internet all servers have got a name and they have got an address which is called as an IP address. IP address is a numeric address which is used to uniquely identify the machine on the internet. For accessing information for the human interface, we use a name like www.google.com, but machines, when they communicate to each other, use IP address to identify machines on the internet. So, when I write www.google.com on my browser first requests a DNS server. DNS server is domain name server, to get the mapping between the name and the IP address. So, www.google.com is also called as the domain name, and a DNS server maintains a mapping between the domain name and the IP address of that server. So, my browser will request the DNS server, please give me the IP address of www.google.com. Once my browser gets the IP address, it sends an HTTP request to the Google web server whose IP address is known and requests for the content. Once this HTTP request is sent to the server, an HTTP connection is established between the client browser and the server, and the content requested is sent back by the server to the client browser, and it is displayed on my screen. It happens so fast that it only takes a few seconds for me to get the content, even if the server is across the globe. Now, one would wonder that there are millions and millions of users who are accessing Google server. Is there only one server which maintains all the information and is serving these millions of users? Logically speaking, we can guess that it should be multiple servers, because most likely one server cannot support millions of simultaneous users. So, what Google does is that they would have multiple servers which have got the same content, and what is done is that when my browser requests for the IP address, different clients are given different IP addresses. So, all the clients write the same name www.google.com, but when the DNS reply is given, different clients are given IP address of different servers which have the same content. So, you maintain multiple mirror servers which have the same content, and you divert clients onto this multiple servers, so that you can load balance the request on multiple servers. Furthermore, what they do is that instead of keeping all the servers at one physical location, they distribute the servers across the globe. So, Google would have servers in North America, South America, Europe, India, Singapore, everywhere, and depending on the location, the geographical location of the client, the IP address of the physically nearest server is provided. So, if I write www.google.com on a client machine in India, I will be connected to the Google servers in India. If I do the same thing in Singapore, I will be connected to servers in Singapore, and if I do it in North America or US, I would be connected to servers in US. And just in case, if I am in India and the India servers are down or not reachable, then I will be redirected to servers which are nearest to India, which could be say Singapore. So, this is how the World Wide Web works. Fundamentally, the content is stored on servers which are called as web servers. It is accessed by client using browsers, using the HTTP protocol, and in case the site has got large number of visitors, then the content is mirrored across multiple servers, which generally would be distributed geographically, and the clients are directed to servers which are physically located nearest to the client location. With this, I end the part 3 of this lecture series, and I also end this lecture series. Thank you very much.